We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. This is episode number 850. We're not doing anything special, but just noticed that's the number we're on. So it's something of a milestone, round figure that comes up. Hooray, hooray.
You know that I never planned on us getting past 999.
Ah, right. Oh, yeah, in the naming convention. It's gonna be an issue. It's gonna be like Y2K bug in the computer.
The Y2K bug is gonna mess everything up for you.
Well, that's still several years away, so that might be just fine. It's snowing very heavily in my area, so that's been fun to deal with.
It's like 72 degrees here. This is beautiful.
Exactly.
This is gorgeous.
You better enjoy it because you get like 2 years out of the day where it's actually a very comfortable temperature in Florida, and the rest. We
went walking with the dogs
ridiculous.
On Saturday. It was glorious. We took him downtown. The big dog was hot. He was all
yep.
the whole time. He sounds like that if it's freezing outside. So people look at us like we're torturing this dog. I'm
right.
like we offer him water like 4 or 5 times during the walk. I think he's got some sort of eye problem, honestly.
Okay.
I think he does because no matter how deep the bowl is or how much water there is in it, he just puts his face all the way to the bottom and then tries to like lick the water off the bottom. And he starts to choke because he's got his whole nose in there.
Can't breathe, yes.
Yeah, he's special. He's a special dog.
A little difficult to talk a doggo out of doing such a thing. So yeah, I'm not sure how that gets trained, but
it like at home, he's kind of figured out our bowl.
Yeah,
like the little dog, she's just like, oh, there's the water. I'm gonna not stick my face in it because I'm not an idiot. And the big dog's like, woohoo, let's go.
It's got to be something down there at the bottom.
Yeah. So, anyways, it was beautiful. It was hot,
Great.
but it was warm, but it was. It was beautiful. I cycled yesterday. I'm not cycling on Tuesdays now, which is when we record this podcast.
Yes.
Because my son needs a ride to school. But I cycled yesterday, and the wind was nice and the air was nice and cool on me. But once I stopped, I'd start just dripping. But
well,
as long as I was moving, I was fine.
Just rub it in, because here we are
perfect cycling weather.
The very end of February for me, and then we got our second big snowfall of the year. So
there you go.
That's
well, you love it anyways.
Fun.
No one's.
I don't mind it, but
see, no one's buying your nonsense.
That's just me. A lot of people around here don't seem to be able to deal.
If you run over to avgadgets.com, where I'm the editor-in-chief, you will see a review in the last couple of, well, I guess should still be on the front page on the day that this is released. I think it came out Friday of last week.
Okay.
The Dark Matter Sentry streaming microphone is from Monoprice.
Okay.
Monoprice makes everything.
Okay, so Monoprice is the brand. Dark Matter Sentry is the model. All right.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Dark
Matter seems to have, like... a number of different products. Like,
okay,
that's
so it's like a Dark Matter series, and then the Sentry is the exact model. Okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Anyways, if you guys know anything about microphones, whatever, especially microphones that you can plug into your computer, the Blue Yeti is something that's come across your radar, and that is a USB mic that a lot of podcasters use, or at least a lot of it's suggested for beginning podcasters.
A lot of streamers use it. A lot of YouTubers use it.
Yes, and I haven't used it myself. It's a perfectly serviceable. Everything I've heard about it, it all kind of lines up. It's got all the features that you want. You plug in. It's got like the volume controls and everything on the microphone itself and all of that. And this is a competitor to that.
Okay.
So the Dark Matter Sentry is basically a Blue Yeti clone, if you want to call it that. All right.
Now, is it shaped like a sort of like a snowball or a rounded over top thingy, or is it?
It looks a lot more like the microphones I use.
More cylindrical.
It looks like an Audio-Technica AT2020. It looks like that,
okay.
Which they also make a USB version of that,
right?
Which I think is called the X or something. I don't remember what it's called. Anyways, the point here is in the review, you can actually hear me using this microphone, which is an XLR connected to like a $300 external USB
microphone preamp.
Yeah, and everything else. So a much more expensive overall setup. You can hear me on this mic and then me on that mic. And
Yes.
You can hear the difference. And there is a difference.
Okay.
But the difference is like I tried to convey this in the review, but it's hard to convey. But you can hear it, and it's when you first hear me go from the Audio Technica to this dark matter Sentry. Sentry.
Yeah, Sentry.
Not Century.
No.
Sentry.
Sentry.
Yeah,
Two syllables.
It's you can hear the lack of bass. Like there's much that like the low end kind of disappears. It's not like no bass. It's just it's not as full. It's not as deep. Okay, but it's after like a couple of seconds of that of me hearing me talk on that, you forget it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You forget that there was more bass before, and then you go, oh, that sounds pretty good. It does.
Okay.
It does sound pretty good, and as of right now, and I think for the next couple of weeks, it's like $70.
Oh, okay. Now there's the burying the lead there, because if this was a $150, $200 microphone, you might go, am I willing to make that compromise? But
right,
it's $70
because the Blue Yeti is something like, I don't know, I think it's $130, $150 retail.
It's definitely at least.
And this one's like.
Yeah.
$99 or $100 retail, so it's already cheaper. But now it's even cheaper than that because it's on sale.
Now the Dark Matter Sentry, is that a condenser microphone?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so it's just like it's a side address. Well, I mean, I don't remember exactly. They call it They called it something
cardioid. Yeah, it's got the cardioid cancellation
but
pattern.
They didn't call it that either. It's a cardioid, but they call it. It is a cardioid. It has they call it an electric. ELECTRET condenser.
Oh, okay.
So it's a condenser style, but it's got pickup patterns on different modes. So it can be a cardioid, meaning it's coming from one direction. Then they have bidirectional and stereo, which bidirectional is front back.
Yeah.
In relation
That'd be
to
like you put it in the middle of a table, two people having a conversation, you get both sides.
Well, you see, the bidirectional is just front back, and stereo is just left right.
Yeah.
So it's like it's the same thing.
The stereo's there for the ASMR people.
I don't know what's going on.
Be a single microphone, and
you can just turn the microphone
right
and get the same thing. So it's the same thing, but it's just different. And then there's an omnidirectional mode on it, and and you can hear me flipping through them. And the thing I wanted to kind of convey with that part of the audio test is like, just because it says that it's in a direction doesn't mean that sounds from the other directions don't get
picked up whatsoever.
They absolutely do. They're just a little bit softer. They're not quite as whatever. But it's overall. So the other thing that the most important thing is how does it sound? Sounds remarkably similar to what I'm talking to you on right now. The thing to know, though, is that they have controls on the mic. So one of the things I'm concerned about is whether or not those controls convey noise into the microphone as you're
if you're already recording and then you use the controls.
Yes. Yeah. So the dials don't. There's two dials. There's a volume for your headphones, which plugs directly into the microphone, and then there's a gain knob.
Okay.
And those are completely silent when you're using it, but there's also a mute button, which you press one of the things to mute, and that mute button is not silent.
Oh, no.
It is not even close.
So that doesn't work as a cough button very well, then.
It does not. And that is the real downside of this, is that there is no way of muting it. There's no way of muting this microphone either. So it's 6 of one, half dozen another to me, but there's no way of muting that microphone silently, which is unless you're going to do it through software or an external source. So that button makes noise, and it's shocking to me. Like, I figured it would make noise in one direction, like when you were muting it.
Sure.
But I figured the unmute would not make noise, but it's not. I think the unmute makes more noise somehow. I don't know how that works, but it does. So but like I said, for the price, it's like crazy cheap. The other thing too is you always have to worry about how the different ways noise can get into the microphone, and they include like a fabric lined USB cord, which I like those. They're nice. They feel nice, but they also are bumpy, and so when you move them around, they tend to drag.
You get the microphonics. You get the scratchy on the cord there. So meant to be stationary.
that conveys into the microphone itself, but you would need to buy some sort of shock mount for it and then put it on a stick like I have. They have a table mount, but that table mount does not in any way dampen vibrations going into this microphone. Sure. So you'll want to put it on one of our AVRant branded speaker decoupling pads.
So special.
It's very special. But I swear, for $70, like, this is... I think that everybody should have a good microphone these days. Yeah. I think it's
Wouldn't
criminal.
that be nice for the Zoom calls and stuff that people are on, where it's like, people are like, why do I get so tired in my Zoom meetings? I'm like, because you can't hear anybody clearly, because they're talking through their darn laptop microphone, and they sound like butt.
Echoes and everything else. It's a nightmare. I'm telling you, for $70, this is a no-brainer.
Right,
just get a mouse pad, put this thing on a mouse pad. Yeah. To help dampen some of the vibration. Keep your hands away from the desk while you're talking into it, and then because it's a plug and play. Like, I had no problems getting the USB picked up right away. Had no problems connecting it to either of my two recording softwares. Worked very well. So yeah, check it out. I was very impressed with it for the price.
Good.
And because it is sort of a Blue Yeti clone. Anything that like says, oh, this will work with a Blue Yeti as far as a shock mount and stuff like that will also work with this thing.
Because it has a pretty chunky body on the Blue Yeti, so it's not like my dynamic microphone where a standard microphone clip will hold it. It's a fatter body than that, so that would physically, when they're saying it's compatible, that would make a difference.
Yeah. All right, so that's a little review of that. So check that out. Rob, what did you watch this week?
Yes, so I didn't watch any movies. I started a movie or two, but didn't have enough time to finish them. But I did get through the entire season 3 of Mythic Quest. That's on Apple TV
20 minutes a pop, so yeah,
they're 20-minute episodes, 10 episodes in the season.
I felt like that show was over.
Nope.
I mean, I felt like they ended it. Like the end of the show was the end of the show.
Things
had to change.
I
guess they're going to keep it going.
Yeah, they're keeping it. And I do believe it got renewed for 2 additional seasons up through season 4. And season 3 definitely felt like they knew they had another season coming. Yeah, this would be my least favorite of the 3 seasons, unfortunately. It's certainly not bad. It's still entertaining. It's still funny, and I still like the characters, but did feel like they were treading water a little bit, even though this was only 10, 20-minute episodes. Felt like they were treading water a little bit. Some of that is baked into the plot as it is, but still, when they got to the finale of season 3, I was like, that should have been the end of episode 3. Or at the most, the end of episode 6 in a 12-episode season. It really felt like not even the halfway point of a story. It felt like a third of the way into the story. So yeah, I can't say it was my favorite from that point of view. Every season, Mythic Quest has one like standout episode, like standout not just in terms of quality, but that they actually like go away from the main cast, have a completely different group of actors doing a standalone, not exactly standalone, but cut out.
They usually tie it back into the rest of the story.
It's tied back in.
It's like a history or
it's a flashback
or origin story.
That's
or something
right.
Like that.
Which they did again this year, and this was my third favorite of the 3. It was. However, I want to say there is a actress portraying young Poppy. Poppy is one of the main characters, and there's an actress portraying her as about 10 years old, I think, like that. She is phenomenal. I don't know how they found this girl, but it is the most perfect of perfect casting I have ever seen in my life. There is no need to like fade between the two characters so that you understand this is the young version of her or anything like that. It's like, holy crow, that is just a younger version of the same girl. They nailed it, and the actress absolutely nailed her portrayal of it. So that was like phenomenal just in and of itself. So anyway, still enjoyable. I'm interested to see how they wrap it all up in season 4. But yeah, it felt like they kind of took their time on this one a little bit. And I very much missed C.W. Longbottom, F. Mary Abraham's character. He was in first position on another show that conflicted, so he wasn't part of this season at all, and they wrote his character out of the show, and very much missed. I always feel like a character like that, even though they're not the main character at all, contributes something that you notice by its absence very much, right. and I felt that way about no C.W. Longbottom in this season. The other thing I wanted to highlight, though, is not a movie or a TV show. I follow the Corridor Crew guys over on YouTube, and they have their own website, corridordigital.com, where you can actually subscribe there to unlock everything. But they did a thing that was total labor of love. It's an idea that one of the computer graphic designer guys over there had this idea for years, which is like he's super into anime, and he wanted to make a ridiculous anime where it was like people playing rock paper scissors, but like the most epic rock paper scissors that ever took place, with like all the anime effects of like things exploding and the lights and all that. And he was just like, this is an idea I have, and he's wanted to do it for like 6 years. So what makes this special is he made it, first of all. It's out there. It's funny. It's good. They do some of the hilarious stuff. Like, he's like, yeah, you got to love those shows where they're like, have you forgotten that we're brothers? To let you know who's related to you. But they like really overdo it just like for satire purposes. And it all was really well done. But there is a making of that goes along with this. There's an entire like almost step-by-step making of on corridordigital.com that you pay to unlock, but they have just a regular sort of making of documentary on their regular YouTube channel. And it is worth your while to watch these things. I'll have links for them in the show notes if you're not already following them. Because what they did was they just used iPhones, they recorded themselves live action against green screens, and then they used AI processing to make it into animation. Because they're like, can we do this? And like, if you've looked at other things where they converted real life footage into anime, or just any animation, it's always very, very flickery. Because it's literally doing it one frame at a time. And it's like, well, it gets pretty close because you're telling the AI, okay, turn this image into whatever in whatever style. But it does it literally one frame at a time. So you get massive flicker sometimes between frame to frame. Well, they go through what they did in the process of training their AI and then using some filters afterwards to like really stabilize it amazingly well. There's a few little like individual frames where it still bugs out a little bit, but it almost adds just to the feeling of it almost being hand-drawn. It's like, because, you know, when you see hand-drawn animation, it isn't always literally perfect frame to frame. Sure. Sometimes there's a little bit of a flicker somewhere here or there, and having that in there really didn't detract from the quality whatsoever. So from a technical point of view, it is remarkable, I think. It looks really good. I would never have guessed that it was 100% AI generated. There wasn't a single frame of animation in this. It was all live action footage that was converted by artificial intelligence to look like it was animated, and it's really worth your time. It's not that long, the making of or the anime itself. So check those out. I'll have the links in the show notes, and it's Corridor Crew on YouTube if you want to look it up for yourself.
All right. So I didn't watch much this week. I did watch Super 8 on a streaming service that somebody could have a code for right? And might have redeemed it.
Yes.
For some reason.
Mm.
You know, if they had bought the movie per se and they said, I have this code. I will now also have it digitally.
Yes. In
theory.
One could enter that
code. Could. Yes, and I watched that with my wife and my 13. I cannot remember how old that boy is. I'm gonna have to do the math one of these days. I think he's 13. He's got to be 13. I think he turns 14 this year. You know what? I've got 3 boys. I can't keep this stuff straight. Mm-hmm. All right. You think Rob's got a big brain full of
usually pretty good at the model numbers and stuff, but remarkably, I haven't programmed in the ages of Tom's sons. That hasn't been my top priority.
My point is that Rob's brain's full of stuff, my brain's full of stuff, and something's gotta fall out. And one of the things that's fallen out recently, and it has been recently, because I think I knew how old he was a couple of days ago, is this stupid age, which I can't remember. Anyway, so I watched it with them, and if you've ever seen Super 8, you know that the train crash scene at the very beginning is like stupid loud.
Some demo material.
It is ridiculously loud. Mm-hmm. And they kind of let you know it's going to be loud because when the train starts going by, it gets pretty loud and the characters are shouting over the top of it and everything. But then it just goes way louder than that during the crash. I knew that was coming. I did not tell anybody in the room it was coming, and I had the volume jacked for it. They just jumped out of their seats when that train
and you don't even have tactile transducers.
Oh, don't worry. We got plenty of tactile information going on in here. They liked it. It's a very, it's J.J. Abrams or whatever his name is, and produced by Spielberg, and it's, I don't want to call it lens flare the movie, but that's pretty much everything that J.J. Abrams makes is lens flare the movie. So perfectly serviceable story. Easy to follow. It's got a kind of that just Goonies kind of feel to it as far as following some kids around, and it's almost comical how stupid everybody is in this movie as far as how they keep running towards danger, but the writing and the directing is so good that you're like, okay, I can go.
Oh, I
you're
bought
like
it from
along
those kids.
for the ride.
Absolutely, I bought it from those kids.
You're along for the ride, and you fully get. And the thing that sells it more than anything is the very beginning of the movie, before anything really happens, and you see how that boy is like immediately stricken with the female lead, and when you see that, you're like, that boy's going to do some dumb crap for that girl. And then that's exactly what he does. Sure. And you're like, yeah, I buy it 100%. Because they took the time. Yeah. They took the time to show that. And not just say, I'm totally in love with her. No, you're not. I mean, I don't know you. Who are you? You could be lying. I don't know. Do you even know what love is? You're stupid. I think you're supposed to be like 13 or 14 or something like that.
At most, yeah.
Yeah. So, really fun movie, short, exactly in our wheelhouse. So very much liked it. I did finish, in fact, I didn't realize it last week, but I did finish Witcher season 1. I was on the last episode. Okay. The last episode of season 1 of Witcher I thought was very good compared to the rest of it, which I still thought was crap. Not crap, but just like ugh. And then season 2 started. I'm liking season 2 a lot more. Now,
is his voice less gravelly?
No, the first season, I think they should have called The Princess Diaries, because it was all about the princesses, the different princesses, and this stupid thing. So this one, we're almost like we're seeing like this one princess go through her journey, which is more about her. What I kind of discovered in my own mind is that we don't appreciate Karen Gillian enough, or Gillian, or whatever her name is.
Gillian. It's just Gillian.
Gillian. She, because I watched 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies before I realized that she was Nebula. And you do not understand how hard it is to do a gravelly voice like that and still emote and have a range, a dynamic range, and have a range of emotions and have a range of different vocal inflections that she does with that. And it sounds natural. There's a couple of lines I can think of between the 2 movies and where I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of weird. It didn't sound very natural. But it never really occurred to me that it wasn't just somebody different. Like, I thought that was just somebody that's how they talked. Whereas Henry Cavill, who I still think is a fine enough actor to do many things, cannot do this. He is incapable of doing anything but sounding gravelly. And then it just kills all his ability to convey emotions or anything else through his voice.
Oh, dear.
So, anyways, liking it more. I'll keep you guys informed. Not that anybody cares. Let's get to our podcast here, which is AVRant, which answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to AVRant, where you can find our show notes, our older episodes, as well as Flickr albums, where you can follow along with all of the images that we're looking at as we're talking about them. I try to describe them for those of you that are listening in the car. I try to describe them as best I can. But for those of you that want to see the images, you're more a visual learner, there we have Flickr albums for you. Or you can you can find us on facebook.com/AVRant podcast, youtube.com/AVRant, where you can see the pictures as we are going through them, because Rob will show them on the screen for you.
That's right.
And then you can contact us directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. All right, I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, to support the podcast in some way. If you want to support us financially, there's 2 ways you can do that. You can go to avrant.com. You can click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and leave us a PayPal donation. Or you can go to patreon.com/avrantpodcast and become one of our patrons. Every month, Patreon will take some money from you, a minimum of $1, and give most of it to us. And currently, we have 140 patrons. So thank you very much to all the people who have supported us financially.
Yes, that's right. Over at PayPal, there is a way to do an automatic monthly donation via PayPal as well, if you are someone who just opposes Patreon for some reason, but is okay with PayPal. So that's a new option there. And then, yes, patreon.com/AVRant podcast is a place you can go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation easily as well. So a big, big thank you to our 140 patrons over there.
Okay. Clicked on the wrong link. Where is the right one? There it goes. Okay. We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through. I don't know what's happening this
Everything that might happen. Yes.
Everything's happening.
Slow news weeks. It was a slow news week this week. We're still keeping going.
There's no such thing as a slow news week. They'll come up with something.
I meant AV wise, not
AV
like
wise,
political wise or whatever.
On.
There's always something going on there.
We're still recovering from CES. I think
yes.
What's going on here. We've got some notes of gratitude from Jay, who's just the movie Grabbers as a fun watch with a great soundtrack, some thick Irish accents throughout. As Rob mentioned with the Banshees of Inisherin, subtitles can be helpful even though they're speaking English. I have seen Grabbers.
Oh, okay. I have not.
I have. I didn't think it was as funny as I wanted it to be, and it's not as funny as I wanted it to be. It's not as scary as I wanted it to be. So it's supposed to be like a combination, like a horror comedy thing.
Horror, yeah.
And it didn't work for me on either.
Oh dear.
but maybe I was just in the bad frame of mind. It certainly, based on my watch history, it was like, you're gonna love this. I mean, that's what it came. Right. That's how it came up. Gurinder sent us a note saying he tried playing around with his dual sub placement, measuring with Rim EQ Wizard. He found he measured the flattest response when he had both subs at the back of the room. So go figure there. All right. Well, whatever, man.
It can happen. Yeah, I did want to mention just quickly, because we're not going to treat this as an entire question, but there is sometimes a bit of misunderstanding when you're doing the initial measurements, when you're still attempting to find the best placement for dual subwoofers, because he specifically mentioned the word flattest. And I'm like, well, at this point where we're just trying to find the best positioning for two subs, we're not actually worried about flatness of the response yet. What we're worried at this point is uniformity of the response across multiple seats, because you might find that you can achieve uniform response that isn't flat, right? It still has ups and downs, but you have the same ups and downs in each of the seats that you care about, like say across your 3-seater couch. And that is the important thing to achieve when it comes to positioning your dual subs, is the uniformity. Because if it's uniform, then we can use EQ and EQ it very effectively. Because if it's the same ups and downs in every seat, then when you apply an EQ, it's going to affect all of those seats equally. And that's where you get your flatness. So if I was misunderstanding, but I know that for sure the word he used in his email was flatness. And if it's like, well, I'm keeping the microphone in one seat and I'm trying to find the flattest response when I'm positioning two subs, that very well might not be uniform when you go to the other seats and measure there. So I want to make sure we're just doing things in the right order and worrying about things in the correct order so that we end up at the best end result. So there you go. A free bonus question answer right here in the Listeners of the Week.
Right. Julian sent us a note thanking us. He says him and his wife appreciate our heartfelt response to his story last week about the birth of their daughter, who was born premature, and some of the travel struggles and complications they've had to deal with. His wife has never really listened to us before, but she's enjoyed their home theater just as much as Julian, and now she's a fan of ours as well.
That's so nice. Thank you.
Well, maybe you should listen to all of our episodes first before.
Oh, no, just leave it at one and leave it with happy emotions and feelings towards us.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I eventually I'm going to say something to piss her off, so I don't know. I think you should just one and done it.
Stop while we're ahead. Yep.
And then also Jorge. So, Rob, repeat those names for us, please.
I certainly shall. There's not that many because it's Jay, Gurinder, Julian, and Jorge, even though it looks long, but that's because we put in a whole bunch of notes besides most of those names. So thank you all very much for thanking us. The notes of encouragement are definitely appreciated, and a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
All right. In the news, hot on the heels of enacting anti-password sharing measures in several countries, because whatever, Netflix is looking to increase subscriber numbers globally by lowering prices in at least 36 countries throughout the Middle East, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Europe. I don't know what countries are in Southeast Europe. I'm sorry.
Croatia, Slovakia,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Those are two I remember. There was somebody else they mentioned specifically.
They've stated that they have an opportunity to add new subscribers in markets where they do not currently have a large share. So, mixed messages much? I don't know.
I mean, it makes sense. It's the classic thing. Right now, they're like, okay, where do we just need to build subscriber numbers? We're not worried about revenue just yet. We'll try to get people locked in and have them forget that they're subscribing to us when they haven't watched anything in a while, but still pay us every month. And then we'll start jacking the prices up again. So it's almost like just going back in time a little bit. And, over here in North America or most of Western Europe and all of that, it's like, oh, they've already been through that stage. We're just watching them try to, because I mean, yeah, Netflix has two ways of increasing profits and revenue, right? They can either increase the prices on their existing subscribers, or they can attract new subscribers. And they seem to have sort of topped out on both of those things. So well, what can we do? Well, we can charge our existing subscribers more by saying, hey, somebody outside of your house watched something, they better pay $8 to us too. And the other way is to say, well, nobody's signing up in these places, so I guess we'll drop the price and see if we can snag a few more. But yeah, I don't know. It feels like the sentiment towards Netflix is very much turning from the, Netflix is, if there's one service I'm going to keep and I'll cancel all others, it used to be Netflix, right? For a long time it was. And now that seems to be turning around a little bit just in sentiment, I think. We'll see how this all pans out for them.
Whatever. In 2022, for the 17th year in a row, Samsung dominated global TV sales, both in terms of units sold, 19.6% of the market, and revenue, which was 29.7%.
Ah, yes, and I'm sure they're happy about the revenue figure in particular, because It wasn't just that they sold the most units, but at no income. It was like that their portion of the total TV sales revenue was almost 30%. That's impressive for a single brand.
Yeah. LG placed second for revenue at 16.7%, but fell to third place behind TCL when it came to units sold. So they sold more expensive TVs, but fewer of them.
Yes, just ever so slightly fewer of them. Yes, it was
11.69% for LG and 11.7% for TCL.
Yeah, they said it was fewer than 30,000 units between them. So it was essentially neck and neck.
TCL's third place revenue at 9.4% demonstrates how the two major South Korean brands, Samsung and LG, dominate the premium TV model market, accounting for almost half of all TV revenue in 2022. However, in terms of units sold, Hisense and
Xiaomi. We don't have the right inflection on that, but it's still a little closer than what we might guess.
We're bad. Round out the top 5 TV brands, meaning that 3 out of the top 5 are now Chinese TV makers. Sony was Japan's top TV brand, ranking 7th globally in terms of units sold. I imagine that has something to do with not having to pay as many taxes or whatever they call it, import tax.
Yeah,
and stuff.
But yeah, it's interesting to see how the global TV market has changed a little over years. But yeah, 17 years in a row for Samsung being the top in terms of units sold and in revenue indicates why they're not so worried about paying some money to Dolby and getting Dolby Vision on there, because it doesn't seem to be hurting them whatsoever. Even though everybody on the message boards and the home theater forums is like, when is Samsung going to finally add Dolby Vision to their TVs? I don't think they care. They're like, why should we give any of our money to anybody else? We're still on top.
Right. Yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
This comes from James. A correction. Amazon. Oh, this is a comment from James.
Well, it is a correction as well. Yes.
Yeah. Amazon updated their Amazon Music app for their Fire TV 4K, Fire TV 4K Max. I had to read that twice in my head before I said it because I couldn't figure out how they were different. And Fire TV Cube devices near the end of January. And now they are able to send Dolby Atmos music via HDMI to your AV receiver or Dolby Atmos soundbar, where you will not be getting Atmos, but whatever. So Dolby Atmos music from Amazon is no longer stuck to only being available through headphones connected to your smartphone or played directly by an Amazon Echo Studio smart speaker. Additionally, there are a couple of Sony smart speakers, the SRS RA3000 and the RA5000, that can play Atmos music from Amazon directly, just like the Echo Studio, and you can cast Atmos music from your smartphone to a Chromecast with Google TV to output it via HDMI that way.
Yeah.
James had success sending a Dolby Atmos bitstream from his Amazon Fire TV 4K to his AV receiver. However, he found there can be a wide variance in the volume level from track to track. Some, but not all, Atmos music tracks are much quieter, and if you switch the same track to its 2-channel version, it's much louder that way. So if you're putting on a playlist that has a mixture of stereo and Atmos music tracks, you'll probably find yourself diving for the remote to adjust the volume, and even if it's an all Atmos music playlist, some tracks are much quieter than others, so it isn't the greatest as a background music experience. Well, there you go. That's not uncommon when we get a new sound format.
Yeah, I mean, I have my suspicions that some of the Atmos music is being mastered to movie reference level because it's Atmos, and they're used to doing that in the Atmos tools, because predominantly it's been movies until now, and then others are still being mastered as though it's music, which is often 15 decibels louder than a movie soundtrack. So yeah, that's pretty common for that to happen, and 15 decibels would definitely count as being very obviously quieter or louder if there's that much of a difference between them. So that's just my suspicion as to what might be going on the mastering side of things.
Right. And that's not uncommon. Like I said, when we get a new format, a lot of times you'll find that there'll be mastering differences, not only between formats like stereo and the surround sound, or stereo and Atmos, as we're talking about here, but also within the new format, because there's, even if there's not a standardization, like the official rule that everybody has to follow, these people talk to each other. Sure. And it becomes sort of, everybody's kind of mastering it to this.
Yeah, you find some best practices.
And then everybody does it that way. So.
But yeah, I was glad to be wrong about that. The information I was looking up was prior to when this update came in. This is not something that Amazon has trumpeted or marketed whatsoever. I had to dig a fair amount to find even any official word from it. I'll have the link to what I found from Amazon themselves, but they have not promoted this at all, that this change has occurred. But I'm happy to have been wrong about that, because yes, I want to be able, if I'm using Amazon Unlimited as my streaming music service, they have a library of Atmos music available there, and I would very much like to hear that on a proper Atmos speaker system, as opposed to just through an Amazon Echo smart speaker, which isn't really a full Atmos experience. So glad that there is a way now to output that via HDMI to your AV receiver. That's great.
Comment from Mike. He says, with our recent discussions about Dirac active room treatment and Trinov's active acoustics double bass array, I can't wait to stop talking about this crap.
Yeah.
Because I don't like saying the words. It sparked it needs to have an acronym, but I guess.
Well, Dirac Art, that's pretty short.
I mean, Drat.
Dart. Dirac active room treatment.
Dart. Anyways, it sparked a recollection in Mike's memory. He could have sworn he read about active bass absorption somewhere a long time ago, and so he went looking. He's sure it came up earlier. In fact, there are references to an earlier version in the article that he found. But back in 2012, there was a review of the Black Hole Active Acoustic Pressure Reduction device posted at 6 Moons. Lord help us all.
Yeah.
6 Moons, if you don't know, is the equivalent of a dive bar in the worst part of town.
Wow. Okay.
Full.
Not sure I would have gone that far.
For audiophiles. It's just full of misinformation and just people self-serving.
You got to do a lot of filtering, all right.
Yeah, I won't even get into it. Anyways, if it comes from 6 Moons, you can. There is not a grain of salt large enough. It's a big one. Anyways, there's a second subwoofer, he says, along with a Dayton measurement mic and a microphone preamp and some EQ software. The language in the review makes it sound like some mysterious, arcane, secret technology that only the most open-minded audiophiles would be willing to consider. The audience of 6 Moons is not who you think it is. These people, if you met these people, you'd be like, you seem pretty normal, and then they would open their mouth and you go, oh God, who has hurt you? Who hurt you? Who made you this way?
Oh, man.
Tom, making friends. Hey, Julian's wife, sorry. Sorry, Julian's wife.
It's a good thing our audience is smaller. We'd be getting those hate comments.
Oh, there's no one who reads 6 Moons on the regular listens to this podcast.
I kind of think the crossover would be small. You never know. Somebody's gonna notice and gonna post about it.
Right. Okay, but it's a fun read. So he says it's fun reading through as they work out for themselves that the second pressure reduction device works best when it's across the room from your front speakers or subwoofer, if you dare to have one, and that it isn't quite as simple as just putting a second sub set to 180 degrees anywhere on the back wall. So, anyways, yes.
Yes, I just did enjoy pressure reduction device. It's a second sub. And it's like, they won't budge on the, all your speakers should be full range. You shouldn't use subwoofers unless you absolutely have to. But then, discovering on their own, and only they could have done it, that it actually works if you put a second subwoofer at the back of the room when the bass is coming from the front of the room originally. Remarkable. Crazy. They got there too.
Where were we? Jorge has a suggestion for James from last week, and anybody else who wants to connect Amazon Echo devices to their AV receiver or whole house audio system.
Yeah.
Jorge faced the same conundrum as James, where he wants Amazon Assistant's voice to come out of the Echo's built-in speaker, but he wants music to be sent to his AV receiver or other connected speakers. I'm right. He says Tom is right. It's just, can you please send that to my wife via certified mail? Right. Yes. I need to know that it was
has to
received.
Be signed for. That's right.
Signed for. In fact, some sort of singing telegram would also work. Bluetooth, he says, is not a good or reliable solution, and Jorge completely agrees that he wants things like alarms and timers to have a fixed volume, while obviously wanting to be able to turn music volume up and down as desired. So he says Rob was on the right track with one of his suggestions. Jorge solved his issues by putting 2 Echo devices in each room. Just keep throwing money at Amazon.
Right, yeah.
Just give them all your money. The trick is to assign them 2 different wake words. You have 5 wake word options to choose from. So all of his regular Echo devices that he uses for timers and voice commands, etc., they use the regular she who shall not be named names wake word.
Regular name, the regular A-lady name.
And respond out of their built-in speakers. But for streaming music, he's got a second Echo device in each room that is set to use the Ziggy wake-up word instead. And those only play out of whatever speakers are attached to those Echoes. Clearly, everyone in the house has to get used to using 2 different wake words, but it solves the conflicts and is reliable. Okay, can I just talk for... this is going to send me down a little bit of a rabbit hole for a second here, but can I talk about trying to train your family to do things?
Right, yes.
Real quick, because I got a call from my parents that they got a new router or new modem / router because their old one broke, so the cable modem people came out and installed a new one, and now their Harmony doesn't work anymore.
Yes.
So I this was during when I had COVID, so I was like very sick. I'm not coming over. Make sure that you do this. So he's like, I did all that. It's still not working. So I finally got better, and I went over there and checked it out. How do things get this screwed? Like the HDMI cable was unplugged from the DVD, the Blu-ray player. And they're like, the Blu-ray player doesn't work anymore. I'm like,
why do it? There's your problem.
How does this? And then the 2 plugs that are in the back of their soundbar, which is what they use as their switcher, had gotten switched. Right, one for the cable box and one for the Chrome. I don't remember what it was, but they'd switch, so they would turn on one and they would get the sound for the other.
Go to the input for the other. Yes. Yeah.
It was, and I'm just like, how did you? I didn't touch those cables. I'm like, ghosts have done these things. No. I mean, so I think that Jorge is dead on that this can clearly it can absolutely work. There is no world in which I can teach my family to use 2 different names to work this thing
right. Well, I mean, I like the suggestion. I was aware that you could change the wake word, but it didn't occur to me when we talked about it last week that that's the way I could make the having 2 in there. I did occur to me after recording. I was like, well, since we really only need to hear the voice coming out of one of them, I was like, you could actually mute the second one so that it doesn't respond at all, but then you could just tell the one that isn't muted to play the music out of the one that is muted.
Oh God.
I was like, it occurred to me afterwards, but like, no, I like this solution better because either way that would involve training your family.
Yes. I did buy a new Ethernet cable, by the way, and now I have fixed my side of
our internet connection seems to be strong this week. Yes. Hooray.
It's a Cat 8.
Ooh.
I didn't realize what happened to 7? Did we miss 7? Did I
miss it?
There was a 7? I missed.
Cat 8, that's got to be pretty kind of stiff, isn't it? Chunky and stiff?
It's a flat cable. I got it from Monoprice.
Okay.
I bought it from Amazon or Monoprice. I bought it from somebody. But yeah, I think it's a Monoprice one. I don't really remember. I don't know.
Whatever, it works good enough.
Yes. I was mostly worried about how beefy the connector looked, because that's what broke on my last one. Get to some questions here. Brian has been running a 5.2.4 configuration, but he just bought a Denon X6700H, so now he can expand to 13 speakers instead of just 9.
I don't know how he ever lived that way.
Like a commoner.
That's right.
He's trying to decide if he wants 9 floor-level speakers with 4 overheads or 6 overhead speakers with only 5 or 7 floor-level speakers. So we have some pictures here. He's got a nice big room, big-ish room. He's got a couch, sort of looks like a third of the way in from the back wall with a bar behind it and some bar stools behind that. He's got the front speaker. The front wall is a screen for the most part, almost the entire wall, but not quite. Underneath, left, center, right, directly underneath the screen. In-wall
speakers, yep.
In-wall speakers. And he's got surrounds just behind the couch and between the couch, kind of, it looks like between the couch and the bar, elevated slightly. So he's got that going on. And it looks like there's maybe 4 or 5 feet behind the couch to the back wall, which has some acoustic panels back there, it looks like.
And there are surround back speakers mounted there. You can barely see them because they're black against black panels on the back wall there, but there are surround back speakers mounted. He wasn't using them right now because he was 5.2.4 with his 9 speakers maximum. I don't know how he ever survived, but he's already got 7 speakers installed plus 4 in-ceiling speakers already installed. He has a pair of cylinder subs, which are a little hard to make out in the pictures, but one we can see is to the back left of the bar stools, and the other is in the front right corner, again against a black corner trap, so you cannot really make it out easily in the picture there, but there are 2 cylinder subs in diagonally opposite corners.
And he's got a projector, of course.
That's right. Yeah.
Just above the bar, it looks like.
Yep, looks like a JVC.
His current 4 in-ceiling speakers were already there when he bought the house, so they're not really ideally placed. His current top fronts are just a tiny bit in front of his main seats, and his top rears are behind his main seats, but basically directly above his second row of bar stools.
Yeah.
Or second row, which consists of bar stools. Yeah, 2 rows of bar stools, just one row.
Right, yeah.
So he could easily repurpose one of those pairs as top middles. Do we think he should add front heights and go for 6 overheads? With his current setup, he doesn't really notice the front to back panning very much. I don't like my answer. I'm going to be honest with you here. I don't know that the front to back panning was ever going to be like super duper noticeable. I mean, it could be more noticeable, but these are in front and behind you. I mean, that's the fact that they're not like optimally placed is not going to make a huge amount of difference, in my opinion. I should let Rob answer this question before I start bagging on everything. So, and I don't want you to get your feelings hurt. I'm not. I mean that in the kid glovey kind of way. I'm not gonna insult your setup. Your setup is very nice. Go ahead.
It's very nice. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways to tackle this. I certainly don't think going for 6 overhead speakers is out of the question.
Sure.
And there's a couple of ways that we could go at this. One would be you could reposition what you already have and add another pair, because right now you don't really have top backs. To be fair, like you essentially have top middles and kinda top fronts, but as you say, they're barely in front of your front row of seats. So what you really have is almost 2 pairs of top middles. So I mean, what you could do if you're willing to go through the minor construction and some patching in that is you could move what you have. In which case, if you moved what you have, you could probably get away with 4 and actually have optimally placed top fronts and top rears. Or you could basically leave the ones that are already directly above the bar counter as top middles, move the top fronts a bit forward and add another pair towards the back of the room as true top rears, or, have some rear heights mounted on the back wall. That could work too. I'm not super duper keen on like leaving what you have and just adding front heights, because I don't really think that's going to give you the experience you're looking for. First of all, front heights in general, I'm kind of like, ugh, I don't really know that front heights. I'm all in favor of labeling your frontmost overhead speakers as front heights, just for DTS-X purposes and the way that it steers sound. But actually mounting front height speakers just on your front wall, I'm like, it doesn't really give the effect that you're after. So yeah, if you're not willing to do any construction whatsoever, I would probably add a pair of speakers on your back wall so that you genuinely have rear heights. Now, whether you continue using the existing 4 and calling that 6 overheads as top fronts, top middles, and rear heights, I don't know. I would maybe question that a little bit. Because the other thing you could do is like use all 4 of the speakers that are already there without moving them, just wire them together as top middles. So you have 4 speakers playing top middles, or just pick one or the other and call them top middles, and then actually add rear heights and front heights and have your 6 overhead channels that way. But I'm almost keen of doing some half and half here. I'm almost keen of doing rear height speakers on the back wall, repurposing the ones that are over your bar counter as top middles, and then moving the top fronts a little bit forward so that they're genuinely top fronts. I don't know if that's the answer you want to hear, but I've sort of talked my way through all the scenarios.
Okay, so there's a couple things I see here, and I have said this on this podcast many times before. I've said this in my life many times before. And it's amazing how many times people fall into this trap. The trap that I've got a thing that it has some that I believe other people value. That there's a value there. That there is a cost associated with that thing. Therefore, I must try to eke out that that value or that cost of that thing. Okay, you bought this house with those speakers in it in that place. And your thought was, well, I've got speakers here. I should use them. Why? Why? Why do you think that? Why do you think that you need to use these speakers that are placed in the wrong place? Okay.
And I mean, they're not miles away, and they're certainly fine as top middles. So there's that.
I don't know what kind of speakers there are up there.
Yeah,
I don't really care. The point here is that, is you fall into the trap of, I've got this car that I've been driving for however long I've been driving it. It still runs. Therefore, I should continue to use it, even though I can afford a new car or I can afford a better car. I'm just going to stick with this car that I have to spend thousands of dollars on every year just to keep it from falling apart from underneath me. Okay, you have gotten the value that when you bought the house. If you had said, take those speakers out, you would have gotten no money back for that. It's like, I'll pay for the entire house, but the speakers, the house would cost the same. Those speakers are valueless, really. To you, because of how you paid for this whole abode. So what you should be doing, if you really want to do this, is not say, how can I continue to use these speakers that are not where I want them to be, and I don't know what quality they are, and a bunch of other stuff. You should say to yourself, do I need to keep using these? And if I don't, what should I be getting instead? So rather than, you just leave them there. Leave them where they are. Just wires hanging out the wall or whatever. Push them back into the wall. Put new speakers up there where they should be. And then those become your speakers. I don't care if they're on wall, on ceiling, on wall, front, back, or whatever you're going to end up doing. Stop looking at those things and saying, if I'm wasting money if I don't use them. You're not wasting money. They have no value. Those are valueless items.
Existing speakers out of our mind. Do we think you should go with 4 overheads or 6 overheads?
4 all day long. 4 all day long. All day long. Okay. Especially with 2 rows of seats. Okay. I also think you should get rid of your surround back speakers, but that's just because I think you're going to end up putting.
He hasn't been using them for the past while. He hasn't been using them.
I know you just got this new receiver that can do all these things, and if I don't use all the channels on my receiver, I'm wasting money. You're not. You're not.
I'm looking at his seating layout the way that it is, and this is one where I'm like, I think 4 overheads will do you. And really, I just want them a little bit farther forward and a little bit farther back than the ones that are already there.
And so they encompass both rows of seats.
That's right.
Right? And you get that steering. If not, you're going to end up having to look at those top middles that you're trying to put up there and going, well, where should I put them so that they're best for both rows of seats?
He's already got lights right where top middles ideally would be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I would do that. I would do 4 overheads in this setup the way that it is. I would just want them a little bit farther forward and a little bit farther back than the existing ones, whether that's moving what's there or just leaving what's there and adding 4 new ones. One or the other, pick your poison.
I know he's not going to like any of the answers
I know.
to these questions.
But that's what we do
so
here.
sorry.
We give
Julian's
unpopular
wife.
answers that are genuine.
So this is why we don't have as many listeners as we should, because we don't tell the people what they want to hear. People want to hear, put as many speakers as you can in your room, use all your amplifier channels. Listen, you bought this receiver for a lot of reasons, and not just because you can add more speakers into your system, because you weren't using all the speakers that are in your system currently.
Yeah.
You bought it because of room correction and multiple subs and everything else, a bunch of other stuff that it can do that your other receiver couldn't do, or you bought it because your other receiver broke and you got a good deal on this one or whatever. I don't really know why you bought it, but the fact that you don't eke out every single feature that this thing has does not mean that you're wasting money. It means that you're using it for it. My car does a bunch of stuff. I've never gotten my car over like 80 miles an hour. Does that mean I'm wasting all that engine power past that? No, I don't need to go that fast. Some people do, but I don't. And it's not a waste. It's just I don't need it. And in your room, you don't need 6 overhead speakers. And I think
this setup doesn't really demand it. Yeah, you don't have the 2 rows of seats that are wide enough apart that you genuinely wouldn't be able to steer properly without more than 4.
I think Rob would agree it would be more detrimental to have top middles because of your 2 rows of seats to begin with. So anyways, let's just go. Excuse me. He's a gamer, so he's thinking he'd get more use out of the front wide and surround back speakers than if he were only watching movies. He heard us say how, with Atmos and TSX movie soundtracks, front wides often just sit there, not playing anything. But with games, would they get more use? The same for surround backs.
I mean, yes, somewhat, because it is predominantly object-based audio in the games that use it that way. Now, you know me, I'm one of the few front-wide fans out there who actually deploys them. I'm looking at this room and I'm going, it's kind of narrow for front wides. Yeah. I gotta be honest with you.
Your front speakers are already too narrow, in my opinion.
Sure.
They are barely wide enough.
Your front wide speakers, to get the correct angles, would have to be quite a ways down your side walls.
Yeah.
And they would look a little weird. It'd be a little bit difficult to get them angled correctly. And then, I'm just like, as much of a front wide fan as I am, I don't similar to how very often in 2-row theaters, I would be going for 6 overhead speakers, but your specific configuration doesn't demand that, and same with front wides. Your specific configuration, this specific room, doesn't really go along with front wides in a way where I would highly recommend them. I don't think you need them, and I don't think you'd be able to deploy them optimally. So I would err on the side of not using them. I would go ahead and use the surround backs that are already in your setup. I see no downside there. And the good news is now you can power your total 7.2.4 configuration from your X6700H. It has 11 amplifiers built in. So you're still getting benefit from having that model. It's that you don't need any external amps.
Speaking of external amps.
That's right.
His X6700H has 11 amplifier channels built in. He's going to need at least an additional 2-channel amp. Not if he
did all 13 speakers, but we're just saying you don't really. Yeah.
But would it make sense to power his front 3 speakers externally, then use the Denon's built-in amps to power the rest? How would you assign the Denon's amps to do that anyways, and which amplifier would we recommend to him? This is the rabbit hole, and I know you've heard me talk about this, my man. This is the rabbit hole you go down as far as powering all everything with your AV receiver, and then you're like, all I need is 2 more channels, and you're like, well, if I'm going to get 2, I might as well get 3. If I'm going to get 3, I might as well get 5. If I'm going to get 5, I might as well get 7. And pretty soon, you're looking at a $2,000 purchase, or $2,500 purchase.
I'm going to stop before that in my recommendations, but yes, there's some rabbit hole tumbling even in my answer.
We don't think that you need this.
Not really. You don't really need it. No.
You can power all this. So maybe that empowers you in some ways, because even though I'm saying ignore the overhead speakers you currently have, buy two more pairs of overhead speakers and install those in correct locations. Rob's saying just move the ones that you have, which I think is harder than, because that involves
either way you're making some
drywall
new holes in your ceiling, so
Yeah.
it's whether you're also patching some or not.
But the
That's
point
difference.
is that you're not buying front wise, you're not buying top middle, so you're kind of already saving some money. So maybe if you had already kind of in your mind budgeted this money, you're like, well, I still got this money to spend, I can get more. I think you just you don't. For me, even with what we just said, all the stuff that we just said, I mean, if you weren't having problems powering your speakers as is, you don't need an external amplifier. So you shouldn't spend this money. But if you're going to, then I would just get, a 2-channel or a 3-channel amp and either do the front overheads.
The easy answer is if you do want to power your front 3 would be Emotiva's Bass X A3, currently going for $550. Now here's where it's so easy to tumble down the rabbit hole, because they've adjusted their prices a little bit, and now the A5, because they actually have an A3, an A4, and an A5, and they all used to just be $50 apart, but for some reason the A3 used to be $500, and then the A4 used to be $550, and the A5 was $600. $600. They were $50 apart. But the A3 got more expensive, so it's now $550, and the A4 is like $570, and then the A5 is still $600. So it's like there's only $50 more to get the A5, which I'm like, oh man, it's so easy to tumble down that $50 hole, because that's barely any more expensive, and you get a 5-channel amp. It's really nice. Outlaw Audio's Model 5000X, which is a little bit more powerful of a 5-channel amp, it's $770. So even there, that's where I stop. I'm like, nope, you are forbidden to go any further than that. And honestly, I would stick with the Emotivas. But yeah, it is kind of tempting to get the A5 when it's only $50 more than the A3. So that's where I would point you. That's what I would get. Now, in terms of how you actually configure your Denon to do that, all of the Denon's pre-outs are always hot, unless you specifically put it into preamp only mode, in which case none of its built-in amplifiers work whatsoever, and it only works via its pre-outs. So that's fairly easy in that you can connect external amplifiers to any of the speaker channels that you want at any time. They're always active, the pre-outs. But if you ignore everything we've said and you do end up doing front wide, so you have 9.2.4, or you end up doing 6 overhead, so you have 7.2.6, and you do have 13 speakers, you'll notice during the speaker setup of the Denon that it will get you to assign which 2 speaker channels must be powered externally. Yeah. There's a pre-out setting, and what that is setting is 2 of these 13 speakers have to be powered externally. Which 2 are they? And they only give you 2 options.
2 options. That's
Option
right.
number 1 is my front, left, and right speakers have to be powered externally, which is what you would want to do if you're going for this 3-channel amp. Or option number 2 is my rearmost overhead speakers, whatever they might be. They might be rear heights or top rears, but my rearmost overhead speakers have to be powered externally. Those are the 2 options. But the thing to keep in mind is that all 13 speaker channels are always coming out of the pre-outs. So you can power any speakers externally anytime you want.
Yes. But don't do any of that. Just use the receiver.
Yeah.
Ryan has a Sony A80J OLED, and he's been using his Xbox Series X to play Ultra HD Blu-ray discs. While the Xbox supports Dolby Vision from streaming video service and in games, it still doesn't support Dolby Vision for Ultra HD Blu-rays, and never will, as far as I know.
Probably not. Yeah.
It only outputs those in HDR10, so is he missing out? Would it be worth getting a standalone Ultra HD Blu-ray player that can do Dolby Vision, or would he really not see a difference and just be wasting his money? Does he have to spring for the Panasonic UB820, or would the less expensive Sony X700 be fine with the full knowledge that you have to manually switch Dolby Vision on and off, which he's fine with? Man, if I'm going to buy a player right now, I'm going to get one to where I don't have to press buttons more than once.
I can't believe that the Sony players are still like that. Although, I mean, they've never bothered to update them. Nobody has. Yeah. For years now, we've had the exact same crop of Ultra HD Blu-ray players available to us. I mean, there's going to be a time where you either forget to turn Dolby Vision on or forget to turn it off. It's going to happen. So, I mean, just for that, if you care about Dolby Vision, I'd go ahead and I'd wait for a sale on the UB820 and I'd pick one up then, because it's kind of the only Dolby Vision Ultra HD Blu-ray player I'd even bother getting, because there's no way you're going to always remember to manually turn it on and off, which is a ridiculous thing to even have to consider. But my real answer is I wouldn't bother spending any money on it, because your Sony A80J already does frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping of HDR10. The Sony opts for a slightly different approach to frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping than LG does. LG tends to go for retaining as much highlight detail as they possibly can, which means that some scenes on the LG also, when you have their frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping turned on, tends to boost the shadows a little bit. So they will kind of compress everything in the middle so that you hold on to all the highlight detail and raise the shadows a little bit and see those things in the top and bottom of the image. Sony's approach to dynamic tone mapping is they want the average picture level to remain more accurate and stable. So they might clip off a little bit of the absolute highest highlight detail, and they don't tend to boost the shadows, which means they're sticking to accuracy, but you won't necessarily see as much detail every time, especially if you've got some lights on in the room or something like that. But that doesn't mean that they're doing anything wrong, because when it comes to tone mapping, it is a choice. The manufacturer has a choice of what approach they want to use. But regardless, I think what the A80J OLED does in its frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping of HDR10 looks really, really good. And unless you have a Dolby Vision version literally side by side with it, you are never gonna notice that some little highlight detail might be missing. And even if you did do a side by side, it's almost like a personal preference thing as opposed to like what is truly right or wrong. So I don't think this is worth the money. Because you have a display that already does frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, I would just stick with what you got.
Fair enough. It's funny. It's hard to... So I wrote an article about whether or not Dolby Vision is worth it. And I wrote this quite a while ago, and things have changed since I wrote this article. Mm-hmm. I'll send the link to Rob to put in the show notes. But the basic idea is that all things being equal, Dolby Vision does have some benefits to it, over just straight HDR10. But depending on your individual gear and situation, it like Rob said, if your TV is already doing frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping... Well,
that's the key. Yeah.
Do you really need Dolby Vision? Dolby Vision actually might look worse. I mean, it probably won't, but it
well, because
I
mean, if you've got a TV that doesn't hit 1,000 nits and doesn't have any frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, the difference then between HDR10 and Dolby Vision is usually more visible. It's more obvious because it'll be clear that there are highlights being clipped off if your TV doesn't do frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping and it can't hit 1,000 nits. It'll be more obvious in that one, but when you have a TV that does frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, the difference is negligible. So I don't think it's worth laying out $400 or $500 for a player just for those discs. Yeah.
Jay has a Marantz SR7010 receiver. He wanted to use Marantz's smartphone amp to control it. The app, in his words, sucks. It constantly loses connection with the receiver. Sometimes it can't even find the receiver on the network. Power cycling the receiver usually used to resolve that, but even that doesn't work reliably anymore. And then sometimes the app shows the receiver, but when you tap on it, nothing happens, no response. He's not the only one. Other people are reporting lots of connection problems too. He's been waiting on all the HDMI nonsense to sort itself out before upgrading his receiver. Seems like maybe it's about time now. But is there a different brand he should consider that actually has a worthwhile app? You know what AV receiver manufacturers aren't super good about making? Apps that don't suck. I'll be honest with you. As much as I love my Harmony, the Harmony, like the controlling a Harmony with the Harmony app, sucks. It's so bad. like it somehow puts every control that's possible between all your devices onto multiple screens.
Yeah.
And still manages to miss the one control you really want, which is volume. It's like something stupid won't be there. So there aren't really good. No, yes. In fact, the Odyssey app, I've had problems when I've tried to run Odyssey using the Odyssey app to do the calibration. I would get 2/3 of the way through it, and then I would lose connection. I ended up, and I know this makes no dang sense. I ended up putting it close to the door of my home theater, my phone, close to the door of my home theater. I think what it did was stop me from touching my phone to do other things while it was doing it. But it was like, oh, it's closer. It's working now. I'm just, yes, the apps are not great.
This is like the remote control app and the setup app and stuff. Yeah. But I mean, I can't point you to another brand whose app situation is way superior to Denon and Marantz. They all kind of suck and have issues like this. I will mention one reason that you might be finding more problems than you used to is Denon and Marantz have a newer app for the remote controls for newer models than your SR7010. So if you go looking for a Marantz remote, there's 2 versions of it on the App Store, and one is for older models like yours, and the other one is a bit newer. Both of them have similar problems, but the even older version really hasn't been updated for at least 3 years at this point. So that can sometimes have conflicts with like just newer smartphone hardware because they've just haven't updated anything as far as bugs go. So that could be some of the reason that you're having even more connection problems than you used to. But I can't tell you that the situation with a newer AV receiver model and that newer version of the app is like way better or something, because it isn't way better. But same for Yamaha and Onkyo and Pioneer and even Anthem and other brands like that. Like it's like that across the board. The one app that seems to be a little bit better is the Blue Sound app that NAD uses. In general, that seems to be going a little bit better, but that's for controlling the streaming music side of things. It isn't for just like app control. NAD does have a remote app, and it has just as many connection problems as everybody else. Right. But the Blue Sound app, it tends to be a little bit better than other offerings. So if you want to consider a NAD receiver just for that, that might be it. But I can't tell you there's a great solution here that stands out above all the rest.
Right. He wanted to put corner bass traps in all 4 corners of his room, but one of his back corners is already taken up by his gear rack. So is it a huge problem if he puts corner bass traps in 3 out of the 4 corners? Do they need to be symmetrical? And what if the traps in his front corners are smaller and thinner than the ones at the back? Anything is better than nothing.
It sure is. When it comes to bass traps, they don't need to be symmetrical or acoustically symmetrical, because of course if you have a room where one side is open, you're not going to have symmetrical side wall panels. But the idea is to try and get as close to acoustically symmetrical when it comes to specific reflections, like off of your side walls or off of your back wall. But for bass trapping, it doesn't need to be symmetrical. We just want to reduce the reverberation time in the crossover region between your speakers and subwoofers. We just want to reduce that reverberation time throughout the room. So that is where like literally anywhere you can put bass traps is good. It doesn't need to be symmetrical. It doesn't need to be in specific corners. It doesn't have to be the vertical corners. It can be between the floor and the wall or between the wall and the ceiling. It can be anywhere in the room. Bass trapping is a good idea. So don't worry. If you've got 3 available corners, absolutely use them. If some of those bass traps are smaller than others, it just means they won't go as low in their absorption as the ones that are thicker. The thicker bass traps will be effective to a lower frequency, but any of it is good. It's all better than not doing it. And don't worry that one corner is taken up with your gear rack and you can't put a bass trap there. That's okay.
I've never been able to reach to use the tri-traps that I have. I've never had a room that was tall enough where I could stack 2 on top of each other. Stack 2 on top, yeah. My rooms have always been just a little bit too short. Like they're technically 8-foot ceilings. Not in this room. This is a add-on, but the house I had in Jacksonville technically had 8-foot ceilings, but when you put the carpet in there and you put drywall, it's not quite 8 feet, and they were just a little too tight. For his side walls and back wall, he watched Home Theater Guru's video about the best type and placement for panels. He made suggestions to use combo panels on some portions of the side walls, as well as diffusion panels on either side of the back wall,
so he was saying like thick absorption in the middle of the back wall and then on either side of that diffusion panels.
Yeah. rather than only using absorption everywhere. Jay was planning to build his own panels. Are combo panels something you should consider? His room is roughly 13 by 23 feet. His speakers are all golden ear. He can put thick panels on his back wall and 4-inch panels on the side walls for the first 10 feet. Any panels on the side walls further back than 10 feet would be thinner, or else they impede the walkway. I am of the opinion that diffusion is so overrated as far as
I think people get taken in by the cool looks of diffusers.
I just had this conversation with Andrew, because Andrew had written an article, and he's like, how come you haven't published this article? I'm like, because you said something about diffusion, I don't agree with it, and I wanted to get back to you on it, and he was like, oh, what did I say? I said, you said to use it.
Diffusion is for a very, very specific issue.
People think that diffusion somehow makes less sound in your room, and that's not at all what it's supposed to do. It doesn't absorb sound. It just makes it less focused as to where it's bouncing from.
Well, and I also hear the reverse of keeping the room alive by having diffusion.
That is not our problem.
Let's say what diffusion actually does. Diffusion panels, unless they are unreasonably deep,
right,
what they do is they only impact high frequencies, diffusers, and they do reduce the strength of those high frequencies. They don't add to your room. They don't make the room more alive. They reduce the strength of high frequencies because they are essentially making all those high frequency reflections travel a greater distance by scattering them.
Yeah.
So they are like a really weak, narrow bandwidth absorber, okay? That's the easiest way to think about what they're really doing to the sound in your room, is don't think of them as reflecting the sound and making the room more alive or anything like that. They are reducing the strength and only at high frequencies and not as much as an absorber would. So they're really only valuable if you have measured your room and you have a very specific problem. And you say, what I can't do with this very specific problem is reduce the strength of anything besides the treble. And I do need to reduce the strength of the treble, but only a little bit. And that's when a diffuser would be valuable, which is a really small little niche of when it's valuable. Now, what can make more sense is that, as we talked about before, you can basically never have too much bass trapping. You could cover every surface in your room with bass trapping, and as far as the bass goes, it would never be too much. But if you covered every surface of your room in bass trapping, it would sound like a padded room. It would sound pretty darn dead in the mid-range and treble. And you would end up with a line that still falls within Dolby's this is okay reverberation times in a mixing studio, but you'd be right at the bottom acceptable line, which is like a downward slope of decay times and then very flat in the bass. And they want a little bit more of a flatter line across the mid-range and treble. So what makes more sense is, you put in a whole bunch of absorption panels as thick as you can. And then if you need to bring back some of the mid-range and treble, saying that a combo panel is really going to do that, to some extent it does, because it will reduce the treble a little bit less than just the naked absorber, but it's still reducing the treble like we talked about. That's what the diffusion panel does. What makes more sense, and if you've really heavily treated your room, is to have some of the panels be like GIC's flex range membrane panels, because what those essentially do is make it even more effective in the deep bass, which is all good. And then it's like a reflective surface on the front for the mid-range and treble, as opposed to just being a diffuser, which will weaken those reflections. It almost turns it back into a solid surface for the mid-range and treble, and actually does get you back the decay times that were maybe being deadened too much by absorption only. So I've come around to, unless it's purely for aesthetics, I wouldn't really do combo panels, the ones that are like a diffusion scatter plate on top of an absorber. I don't really think they have that much benefit, acoustically speaking. If it's purely for looks, fine. You just like the way it looks. It's not really going to be much different than just an absorber. But if what you're actually getting at is I'm putting so much bass trapping into this room that I really have over deadened the treble. Then what would make sense is having those, they are a type of combo panel, but it's the flex range limiter panels that have a semi-solid membrane on the front. That's going to make the treble more like if you hadn't put so many absorbers in the room. That's the approach I would take. But you, with what you've been talking about in terms of 3 out of my 4 vertical corners are going to have bass traps in them, then I'm going to have a couple of panels on each side wall and some panels that are pretty darn thick on my back wall, you're done. You're done. Unless you were going to put way more panels than that, which you haven't described as being the plan, unless you're going to cover all the walls and ceiling in 4 to 6 inch thick insulation too, then you're done. Absorption. This is where
I start to talk in absolutes. And I so rarely on this podcast really talk in absolutes. I make jokes in absolutes, but I don't give advice in absolutes. The absolute answer about diffusion is you don't need it. Because there is no one who has ever written into this podcast at any point other than me who has put so much absorption in a room where you can make the argument that's too much. Yeah. You need less absorption in your room. Yeah. And that was in my 10 by 11 room where I had something like 20 something, almost 30 panels.
And you can hear it. It's very obvious. You can hear it. You're like, yeah, it's real padded in here.
So that's why the conversation I had with Andrew was like, there is no room that is if you have to ask the question, do I need diffusion in here, or would diffusion benefit me? The answer is no. Just by not knowing that you need it.
In Tom's example there, if you added diffusion to what was already there, it wouldn't bring the treble back.
No.
It will reduce the treble even more than what it already is. So then they're like, okay, the combo panel where you're putting some kind of scattering plate on top of the existing panels, that is a little bit because it's still reducing the treble, but not quite as much as the naked absorption panel. But it isn't really doing what you need, which is to essentially bring some reflections back into your room.
Right.
But that's what the range limiter membrane would do. So I'm in favor of sometimes using that. But until you've got to the point that you've put so much 4 to 6 inch thick insulation that you've essentially covered every surface in your room, until you get there, you don't even need that. So I would, in yours case, absolutely just do absorption only.
So you're DIYing. So you can make, and I would absolutely agree with this argument, that you like the way they look, the combo panels look. Or you may even like the way diffusers look. That's I think diffusers look like those true
cool.
wooden diffusers look very, very cool. And if you said, I think I would like some in here, put some in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I say, the combo panels, if it's aesthetic, I got no beef with them because they don't really act any different.
But what I don't want you to do is say, okay, well, I was going to put an absorption panel here, but I think I'll put a diffusion panel instead because of, I want to make sure that I've got enough liveliness or whatever acoustic reason that you come up with. If the question is, should I put absorption or diffusion here? The answer is absorption 100% of the time.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah. Andrew did make his own DIY combo panels that had a scatter plate on top of them. And then in the article that is posted now, he's like, yeah, when I measured it, it made no difference. If it was naked absorption versus the one with the scatter plate on it, didn't make any difference. No. But I think they look cooler. And I'm like, that's A-okay.
That's okay. Yeah. So I plan on writing an article pretty soon on AV Gadgets where essentially it's like, just stop it.
Yeah,
I mean, I've already written an article that's like, do you need diffusion in your home theater? And the answer is no. That's what it ends up being. But I'm going to write another one that's just that really hammers home the fact that you can't possibly need I see so many theaters that are quote unquote done with not a single lick of absorption anywhere in there.
Well, yeah.
I don't know how I got on the home theater TikTok, but I was scrolling through TikTok and I must have watched one video a little bit too long. And then it was all these theater walkthroughs and they're gorgeous. Not a lick of absorption anywhere in that place. That's right. Ugh. He says, and I forget who we're talking to here. I'm going to scroll up so I can see Jay. He says, the contractors who ran his in-wall wires for him just used bare, unterminated RG6 cable for the subwoofer location, so he wants to get a crimping kit and the proper terminations, but at a cheap price. He found a crimping kit that comes with an F-type terminators for RG6 cable on Amazon Canada. He was thinking to use those and then screw the F-type connectors into the F-type to RCA adapters. Any reason to avoid that, or something else that's better and cheaper that he should use? I haven't clicked on any of these links, so I don't know.
I mean, it's totally fine because, when you are looking up the crimping kits, there aren't any that come with, RCA. So the ones that come with the F-type, that's what you get, and they're affordable, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Putting that straight into an F-type to RCA adapter, no problem, totally fine to do that. The only thing I will say is if this was all in-wall and you were going to have a wall plate anyway, then your F-type to RCA adapter, instead of being the one that would be exposed and you would plug directly into your device, maybe you just get the wall plate, the Keystone wall plate that is an F-type to RCA adapter. So in either case, it's an F-type to RCA adapter, but I'm just saying, be aware that if you were going to do a wall plate anyway, you can do that at the wall plate and have that conversion. So it still looks like an RCA jack coming out of your wall, but inside the wall, it'll be the F-type. So just be aware that exists and do it that way.
Just read those reviews carefully. You want to especially look for any professionals or anybody who's used multiple tools and can compare. Because a lot of times the cheap tool is not only cheap because it's of lesser quality and might break more easily. Yeah. Which is something you don't care about because you're only going to use it a little bit and then you're going to throw it away.
At most, he's doing this 4 times.
Yeah.
So,
might be beneficial to. That you might not care about the longevity of the tool, but sometimes the price of the tool indicates how hard it is to use, or to how well it does its job. And you may find, because RG6 is not like, it's not that. Lots of different professionals can terminate this for you and have the tools, including
Heavens, yes,
like your cable guy probably has
absolutely.
It. And that's
what they use.
If it were me, I would wait until I saw one of them in my neighborhood in a truck and then say, hey, I'm a customer of yours. I've got these cables that need to be terminated. Could you terminate them for me with these things?
And they'll have F-type connectors with them, the cable guy. And then you still get the F-type to RCA adapters, whether those are the bare ones outside the wall or the wall plate. But they can definitely do the F-type termination.
Because that's a lot cheaper than this.
Probably, yeah.
All right. Infinite Gary. Last week, Gary asked about Anthem Logic music, listening mode that is available on his Anthem Pre-Pro. He compared using that versus a standard stereo listening mode for playing back mono through music CD, mono music CD. When he listened in stereo mode, it absolutely sounded as though 100% of the sound was coming from a center speaker and a center speaker only, even though it was actually only his front, left, and right speakers making any sound. But when he switched to Anthem Logic Music, the soundstage seemed a little wider, still a strong sense that the center speaker was playing, even though it wasn't. But not quite as strictly mono sounding. We said that was because Anthem Logic Music put some of the sound into the surround channels, that's what Rob said, and surround back if you have them, although Gary doesn't in this setup. So he promptly disconnected his surround speakers to hear if they were responsible, and lo and behold, Anthem Logic Music mode still sounded a bit different from stereo listening mode, even with the surround speakers physically unplugged. Still a slightly wider soundstage, and not quite so mono only sound, whatever. One other difference he thought of is that he has his stereo mode set to play with his front, left, and right speakers set to large full range with no subwoofers playing, and the Anthem room correction turned off, while Anthem Logic Music mode still has room correction turned on. Wow, we're not changing 2 or more variables at the same time.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, we didn't talk about any of that, but the first go around, I feel like this is like a gotcha post, but whatever. Music mode still has room correction turned on. His front speaker set to small with a 60 hertz crossover and subwoofer playing. So there's like a bajillion differences between the 2 modes. Why is he hearing something different? I don't know. Maybe because there's different speakers playing. Anyways. So is that where the difference in the sound comes from, or is Anthem Logic still doing some other processing as well? Anthem doesn't divulge exactly what they're doing to the signal. They say they aren't adding an echo or reverb, and then it was carefully designed based on listening tests to be minimalist and not detract from the purity of the sound. But if we were to speculate, what could be going on between his front, left, and right speakers to create a slightly wider soundstage while playing a mono track? How about this subwoofer? How about they are lying?
Definitely could be that.
How about they also lie when they say things like this? When they and not just Anthem, like all of them. Like, can we all talk about the 5th fifth foot on the Yamaha receivers somehow making a sonic difference. They know that's a lie. Everyone knows that's a lie. Like, no one believes that fifth foot.
It is
does
quite
anything.
the joke amongst crowds.
But
I like when some of the
still
models where they moved it out of the middle and moved it towards the front just so they could still have a fifth foot for no reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, this aside, I don't know exactly what Anthem is doing. It definitely could be the case that in one of the modes, you only have your left and right speakers playing in the Anthem Logic Music mode. After you've physically disconnected your surround speakers, you do still have another source of sound, which is your subwoofer. So if there was any little phase difference there, that could potentially be responsible for it. But the other speculation I would have is sometimes upmixing modes like this, they do, adding some reverb is very common. They specifically say they don't add any reverb.
You know what this sounds like to me? This sounds like when you ask your kid if you punched his brother or something like that, and they say, I didn't punch him, and then his brother said, he hit me. He goes, well, I didn't punch you.
Right. Well, along those lines, sometimes upmixing modes like this, they do a little bit of decorrelation, or they do a little bit of left to right, right to left crosstalk. That's really common in headphone upmixing modes, where they take a little bit of the left channel and put it into the right channel when it didn't exist before, and to get some of that it's not inside of your head effect. And sometimes in speaker listening modes, they do a little bit of decorrelation, which technically amounts to one of two ways, or sometimes a combination of both, which is adding a tiny bit, like literally a 1 millisecond delay to one channel, but not the other, or just slightly tweaking the phase of one channel, but not the other. I don't know if they're doing that, but it's certainly not out of the question. It's very common in a lot of upmixing modes to do something like that, which does result in the effect of it sounding slightly more diffuse, which is why they do it very often. So that's my speculation of what it could be. I don't know that it is anything like that. And it could be the case that they're not doing any of that, and it's simply that you have your subwoofer active that's making the difference.
Yeah, whatever. Andrew from AV Gadgets fame. Mm-hmm. So he asks, he hasn't heard any updates about Rob's apartment restoration in a while. What's the situation? Did he get any new gear from his insurance claim yet? Yeah, Rob.
So not a bad time to ask. I finally, 3 months after the physical restoration was done, did finally hear something from my insurance about my personal belongings. I did get some, not all, money from them, and there are some strings attached, so I'm working my way through some of that. So I've purchased a few things that aren't home theater related to get reimbursed for those, and then I haven't really purchased any replacement home theater equipment yet, but yeah, it's finally on the move 6 months after the flood happened. That's where I am.
Very exciting.
Yes.
We've often mentioned that when it comes to decoupling subwoofers from the floor, you don't actually have to use a specialized subwoofer isolation product. Anything that will act as a shock absorber can do the trick, right? So what about hockey pucks? As Canucks, wouldn't it be fitting to use our most sacred of items in our home theaters? They're not squishy enough, my dude. They're not squishy enough.
They're pretty stiff. Hockey pucks are pretty darn stiff. Now, hockey pucks that are not cold, they do bounce. So there is some give to warm hockey pucks. Right? Yeah, it seems a little not quite squishy enough. I think I would want something with a little more squish to it than even a warmed up hockey puck.
See, what you do is you get the AVRant speaker decoupling system. Then you put that on the ground. Then you put the hockey puck on top of that.
Yeah, there you go.
Then you put the subwoofer on top of that.
Then it will be slidey. That would be a slidey surface. Oh, man.
All right. Sorry, he didn't ask me that question directly because I didn't even know those were coming. So that's exciting for me.
That's right.
This just comes from Jay and Jason, or Jay is Jason.
We had a Jay earlier, so this is a different Jay, and they have different last names, but they both started with the same initials, so I couldn't even differentiate them that way. So sometimes this Jay goes by Jason, so that's who this is.
Whatever. Jay is in the condo, and it's an open concept with 8-foot ceilings throughout. He's got his home theater set up in the living room. It's roughly 13 by 20, but it's wide, open to the right-hand side, on the right-hand side to the kitchen and dining area, plus a long hallway to all the other rooms. They don't usually worry about making sure all the hallway doors are closed, so he's potentially dealing with upwards of 10,000 cubic feet of air. but he does have attached neighbors, so blasting bass and blowing out the walls isn't the goal here. Yeah. He's been using a sealed 12-inch M&K subwoofer with a 150-watt amp for the past 15 years or so. It can deliver a little bit of thump now and then when they're sitting on the couch about 11 feet away from the front speakers and sub. But he's always sort of felt that the sub was lacking. It doesn't seem to have any headroom for louder impacts. And when he heard us talking about having a foundation of bass, it doesn't feel as though he has that. But there are limitations. You've already spoken of limitations. And those limitations mean that you can't have what you want. So I don't know how we're going to proceed from here, but let's go on. He's really only got one spot where the sub can go, no place for dual subs, plus it's an open and irregularly shaped space, especially with the long hallway, and then he has only a certain footprint to work with. He's looked at a few different subwoofer models online, and physically the Monolith M10 V2 and Rhythmic LV12M would fit as far as the available footprint. The SVS PC2000 Pro cylinder would also physically fit. However, his max budget is $1,000. I mean... Sorry. So he'd have to hope there's a PC 2000 Pro available from SVS's outlet store in order to make the price work. He already has SVS sound isolation feet on his M&K sub, so he could easily transfer those over to the new sub, though he wouldn't have to do that if he got the cylinder.
The cylinder already comes with them. Mm-hmm.
The Monolith is a 10-inch driver, but uses a 500-watt amp, while the Rhythmic is a 12-inch driver, but uses a 300-watt amp, neither of which makes a dang bit of difference in this case.
Not in this case. No.
So he's hoping we can offer some insight. Since he's limited to one subwoofer and where it gets positioned in the room, will simply having more output and deeper extension be worth it? He's thinking he'd like to get something that could easily move with them to a future house. If and when that happens, what's our advice? The cylinder. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The cylinder is by far, in my estimation, the best in most situations. Not just because I have them and I love them, but also because the footprint is the smallest. They use height instead of depth or width in order to deal with getting the most bass that you can. Yeah.
And in this case, it would have the most output and extension out of any of these.
And be prepared to be underwhelmed with how much. I mean, you will notice a difference. There is no doubt. I don't necessarily. This is a case where, and I we've talked about this a number of times before in the podcast, but this is a case where having more of a thing isn't necessarily going to mean you're going to like it more. Because who knows what bass modes are not being activated by that little sub, which will now be activated by the big sub, and you'll be like, oh my god, it sounds boomy and terrible.
You're going to find all the things that are capable of rattling in your apartment and your neighbor's apartments, or maybe townhouse if it's that type of condo. But I mean, just in terms of what could we point you to that is going to be very comfortable in terms of having the output capability. I mean, obviously it's not going to pressurize 20 hertz to 115 decibels in 10,000 cubic feet if you've left all your doors open. 2000 Pro isn't going to do that, but just having the output and extension capability that can contend with your room size, easily gets moved to a new house and a new room in the future. The PC 2000 Pro is what I would go for all day long. But since you really do only have the one place to put it, there's every chance that you're not going to be able to achieve certainly uniform bass across your seats. I would be shocked if you're able to achieve uniform bass, but even at your one primary seat, you might just have a big old dip or a massive hump at that primary seat that there isn't an easy way to overcome. That said, having the cylinder, I think, gives you potentially more placement options than anything else.
Sure.
Because of its smaller footprint, maybe you can move, like we're talking sometimes even moving it 6 inches a foot can make a difference if it's some giant suck out or hump right where you need it to not be that, or putting it on its side and laying it behind your couch, that type of thing, which you can't do as easily with one of the big box subs. So I think that's the safest purchase to make in all regards. Potentially gives you the most placement flexibility to deal with some things that you don't really have a lot of flexibility about otherwise. But yeah, just be prepared that having uniform linear bass across all your seats when you only have the one sub and limited placement, that just don't go promising yourself that you're going to get that.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I can't, sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Right.
And not knowing, not
set
having
your expectations.
Well, I that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure that you realize that, yes, everybody on Reddit and the forums are going to tell you getting a massive sub will make a humongous difference in your theater. They're not wrong.
It
but
can.
they're also not necessarily saying that it's going to be a good difference. I mean, it should be a good difference, but it might not be. It'll be big. It'll be a big difference. I mean, in theory, and this is not going to happen. In theory, it could be no difference. You could hook it up and go, it sounds exactly the same because there's a massive suck out throughout everything below
Between
what
40
that other
and
sub
60
was
hertz,
playing.
everything I cared about, it's still a big old dip there.
Yeah.
No matter
It
what
occasionally
sub I put
rattles
there.
dishes in the kitchen, but I can't hear it because it's 20 hertz. Will has a Mac Mini, and he'd like to connect a 2.1 speaker setup. He already owns a pair of powered Edifier brand speakers, but he thinks they just sound okay. They are lacking in bass output, and they don't have a subwoofer out, so it wouldn't be easy to add a sub to them, plus he'd just like an upgrade. Mm-hmm. He owns a pair of SVS Prime satellite speakers he could use. Obviously, they need an amplifier to drive them, and again, he likes something with a subwoofer output. Ideally, he would like to be able to control the volume of the speakers and the subwoofer independently. It won't be easy to just reach to the back of the sub to adjust his volume, so he's hoping the subwoofer output of the amp or new self-powered speakers can be adjusted on its own. His max budget is for the entire package is $400. What do we suggest? Does he have a subwoofer?
He didn't say, and he mentioned getting a subwoofer, so I think it's $400
that's your
for
whole budget.
Well, it could be. I mean, I've got solutions that'll work, and will sound very reasonable for a PC desktop setup. So, first of all, your Prime satellite speakers are very nice speakers.
Sure.
And you could drive them with one that I'm going to point to, Fosse's DA2120C. That has adequate Class D amplifier power to drive those Prime satellite speakers as loud as you could possibly want to in a desktop setup. And on the back of it, it does have a dedicated subwoofer output that does activate a crossover when you plug something into it. What I like here in terms of connecting it to your computer is it has every type of connection you might possibly need. It has a USB connection that is ready for audio up to 96 kilohertz. And then it also has an optical in. It even has a coaxial digital in, and it has regular left and right analog input. So whatever output method you were using from your Mac Mini, it's ready to accept those. And then, of course, just has speaker binding posts to connect to your Prime satellites and the dedicated sub out. And then it does come with a remote. Now, the thing here is you can sort of adjust the subwoofer output from the remote because it has dedicated buttons for bass and treble tone controls. So if this is just a matter of, I want some more bass and now I want to turn that bass boost down, it's basically just your standard bass tone control that's available on the remote that comes with this unit. So it isn't adjusting solely the subwoofer output, but it does give you a bass tone control that I think is probably enough for what you want to do. Now, the alternative would be to get some new powered speakers, not use your Prime satellites that you already own, but get some powered speakers. There are some really nice options. Oh, I should just mention that Fosse DA2120C is $160. There's a coupon to apply at Amazon right now, but it's $160. So that still leaves you enough to get, a pretty decent desktop subwoofer setup that I'm going to mention coming up later. But some speakers that I really like, powered speakers that have all the features you're looking for at a really reasonable price, are Yamo's S801 PM for powered monitor. Now, those come in both a black and a white finish. I think they're pretty stylish looking. They do actually come with a grill in the box. It's not obvious from the pictures, but they have a sort of a grayish cloth grill that goes on front. That's kind of stylish looking. Again, I like they have a USB input on the back if you want to connect them that way, optical input, right-left analog inputs, and then a dedicated subwoofer output on this as well. And then the remote that comes with these, the Yamo S801 PMs, it is actually a subwoofer volume up and down, and then just total system volume up and down, not just tone controls. So this is really all the features you asked for is built into this, and they're $200 for a pair. So pretty darn reasonable in price. I think pretty darn nice looks, and literally all the features that you asked for. There's an alternative from Klipsch with their reference R15 PM, again, PM standing for powered monitors. Klipsch and Yamo are part of the same company, part of the same family group, same parent company. So I think they're using the identical electronics because it's the exact same inputs available on the Klipsch and the exact same remote with the dedicated subwoofer up and down. Tom reviewed some Fluence speakers if you want to mention those.
Yes, I did. And you can, obviously you can read the review, the Fluence A141s. Nice powered bookshelf speakers, tons of like finish options, if I remember correctly. Like you can get them in like a couple of different finishes, and they're $250 a pair. And these sound very good for the price. $250 for a full, all of these are like in that same range.
Yeah.
Now
the Fluences, their remote is similar to the Fosse amplifier, where there's bass and treble tone controls. Yeah, but not an actual control that is just specifically for the dedicated subwoofer out, which the Fluences do have. So I think pick your poison out of those. I'll vouch for any of those, whether you want to go with the amplifier to power the speakers you already have, or consider the Yamo or the Klipsch if you really want a actually controlling the subwoofer out volume from the remote control and not just a bass tone control. With any of those, I would pair a Dayton subwoofer. The Dayton Sub 1200, which is the 12-inch version, physically it's basically a 17-inch cube. So if you're trying to figure out size-wise if that'll work, that's $180, and that's a pretty darn nice 12-inch sub for a desktop setup. True extension right down to about 25 hertz. So for any music you're playing, it's not going to be a problem. They have a 10-inch version, the Sub 1000, which is basically a 15-inch cube. If those few inches make the difference for you, it's $155, and it goes down to about 30 hertz. So again, from almost all music, that's going to be perfectly sufficient. If you were going to look at the 10-inch one, though, for size reasons, I'd want you to be aware that Dayton also has one called the Sub 1000L low profile, which is a cool form factor. It's really flat. It can literally fit underneath a couch, or it actually comes with brackets. You can mount it flat on a wall if you want to. And it's a 10-inch sub that goes for $190, again, with about 30 hertz extensions. So you can get a subwoofer and a pair of powered speakers or that Fosse amplifier within the budget you specified, and I think those will do the trick.
Yeah. Vincent asks, did Rob get a PS VR2? Tom isn't getting one, is he? No, I am not.
Okay.
I don't have a PS5 to start with. Don't you need one of those? And
you do need a PS5. Only a PS5. That's the only thing it'll work with right now.
I hate to report that my Oculus Quest 2s or whatever they are over there, they haven't been used in months. They just sit there charging. We just haven't. I've got a lot of stuff going on, just life-wise. It's school time, and during the summer, there's much more chance I'll be capable of using such a thing, but not right now. Yeah.
So I did buy a PlayStation VR2. I haven't even opened it yet, so I can't report anything on it. Hopefully next week I can report some stuff about it, how it looks and how it plays and how it feels and all of that. Although if you're looking around at the reviews online, none of which I doubt, because everybody seems to universally agree on every facet of this thing, which is kind of rare when you're looking at tech reviews, but literally watch anybody's PSVR2 review and they all say exactly the same things, which I'm not really doubting any of that, and it all seems like pretty reasonable takes in all those reviews. So yeah, hopefully I'll report on that next week, but I literally haven't even opened the box yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Julian.
Oh, we didn't answer the question.
What was the question?
Right below. Right here.
Oh, I didn't even see that. Which headphones would go best with it? Which headphones will Rob be using himself?
Yeah, so I have my suspicion. I haven't actually heard them yet since I haven't opened the box, but the little earbuds that come with it, not that I'm expecting them to be the greatest earbuds, although a lot of inexpensive Sony earbuds really aren't that bad. They're not great, but they're not that bad. But it's just the form factor, right? Where they're designed to mold and fit right into the back of the headset there without a whole bunch of excessive cable or anything. And then they even have little clips on the side of the Halo head mount where you can put them in there when you're not using them. So it's a very, very convenient earphone setup that they've already packed into the box. And strictly from convenience, as long as they don't sound like garbage, I am betting dollars to donuts that's what I'm going to end up using. But if I'm, say, using the VR headset to watch a movie instead of play a game, I might want better headphones. It will depend. If I want something where I can still hear the outside world in case a phone is ringing or someone's knocking on the door and I want to be able to get that attention, I'll probably just use my Sennheiser over-the-ear headphones. I will have to find out if they physically fit without knocking into some plastic part of that headband, because it seems as though if the ear cups are fairly large, sometimes it doesn't fit around the plastic headband. So those might be my HD 599s, Sennheisers, or they might be my drop version, the PC38X, which is the same but just has a microphone boom attached to it that I use for gaming and has a shorter cable, which would be helpful for plugging it into a VR headset. But if those don't physically work well, I'll probably just use what I'm wearing right now, my Shure SE215s, but I'll have to do some wire management because the wire's too long and I don't want anything dangling on a VR headset. So something out of that.
Yeah. Once again, Julian, sorry for the psych out there. Julian has a Marantz SR8015 receiver handling a 7.2.4 setup. He also has a Parasound A51 5-channel amplifier, uses its power as front 3 speakers, SVS Prime Pinnacle Towers and Ultra Center, plus a pair of surrounds, Polk RTI A3 bookshelves. He has noticed there is a noise floor. Mm-hmm. To be clear, sitting in their main seats, it really isn't noticeable, but if his system is powered up, but not playing anything, just sitting idle, and he walks within maybe 2 or 3 feet of any of these 5 speakers, there's a soft, low, audible hum. All the rest of the speakers, which are powered directly by the Marantz receiver, are essentially silent. You basically have to press your ear against a tweeter to hear a faint hiss. Mm-hmm. So the noise floor from the Parasound amp is definitely much more noticeable, and since it's a sort of a hum rather than a hiss, he tried using a ground loop plug to eliminate the third prong, just in case it was a ground loop causing it, but that made no difference. Ground loops are usually much louder than that.
Yeah, they're really obvious.
He looked around online and found some other Parasound owners complaining about similar experiences. Some made claims about expensive power conditioners fixing it, but no one seemed to really be able to nail down the root cause. Since it isn't really noticeable from the actual seats, it isn't a big enough problem for him to bother with any solution that would cost a lot of money. But he's just curious if we know the real cause and if there's maybe something simple he could do that would improve it. Boy, this is one of those. You should definitely not worry about it. If non-audible means doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, it is audible if, like, for example, you had a surround speaker that did have a seat within, 2-3 feet of it, which is pretty common.
Which he does not.
Then you might be hearing it. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't think this is a ground loop because those are very obvious and you go, what the heck is wrong? And you wouldn't be able to live with it. So the likelihood of it being that is pretty low. Yeah, I mean, a low hum like this, there's a couple of things that can sometimes cause that. One of which is like literally just the routing of your speaker wire in relation to the power supply of this unit. Because I certainly know when I briefly tested out one of Axiom's Class D amplifiers, it had like the typical bit of hiss coming out of the tweeters, louder than I would have liked, but could have been tolerable. But if you were not giving like 3 feet of speaker wire straight back from the binding posts before introducing any sort of a turn into there, I don't know what was going on, if some shielding was needed or what the heck was happening, but if you had speaker wires like anywhere in the vicinity of that amplifier, I don't know what kind of EMI it was leaking out or whatever, but those speaker wires would pick it up, and it was very odd. Like I at one point I was trying to figure out what was going on. I just picked up a speaker wire with a speaker attached, and I just sort of like I passed it over the amplifier, and it was like it was like a lightsaber. It was like
something's disconnected in there. That can happen with it basically your speaker wire can act as antenna.
Absolutely.
And that can happen. It doesn't sound like this is the case if it's coming from all of his speakers, though.
Yeah, all 5, it would be tough. Although, unless he has some, because of where it's placed, some tight cable routing or something, where, like it's looped right under the amplifier or right over the amplifier, or they're all going along the sides or something. It's not out of the question for it to be something like that. So that's my guess of what it might be. Yeah, that's about all I got. I'm not really sure what else it would be.
I mean,
other than
like
just that is the noise floor. It has maybe.
Extremely poorly shielded, like power cord, like lying across the top of all of the cables coming out the back of the amplifier. I guess it's funny. So I just said I got a new Ethernet cable, right? So this weekend I went and I got the cable. My wife called me talking to me. Did we get a new Ethernet cable? I was like, yeah, I ordered one. Oh, okay. So I went and hooked it up just preparation for today. So I had to take the old Ethernet cable on my professional cable management spool of crap on the ground over there.
Yep.
I had to dig out the old one. When I did, I started moving stuff around. Well, guess what I did? I moved the cable in such a way that it was lying across the banana posts, of my speaker cables, and I turned on my receiver, and it was fine until I started to play some sound, and then it immediately shut down. And I was like, well, I guess I know what I did. So
Right.
you'd be surprised how if you have poor cable management, like almost all of us do, including me.
Sure. And as
Things
to
can happen.
why some people might have bought some expensive power conditioner, and I think like a lot of times what people do is they get that new power conditioner, they plug it in, they plug their amplifier into it, they never disconnected their speaker wires. It's not the way that it used to be, like it's out of the rack, right? Like they literally just took it out of the box and plugged it in, and it's like away from the other stuff. So they have actually rerouted their cables without realizing that that was the thing that did it, but they think it's the new piece of gear that they bought. So you got to be a little bit careful of claims
Just
like
like
that.
when we're talking about Infinite Gary and his situation where things sounded
Right.
different. He's trying to figure out if it's the two sound modes that he's using. He changed 10 other things at the same time. So how could we possibly know what was the one thing that made the difference, or if it was
Right.
just one thing that made a difference? It could be a ton of things that made a difference. Swapping out one piece of gear, good luck doing that in such a way that you didn't change anything other than just that piece of gear.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, if that's the thing you're paying attention to, you think that's the one and only variable. Now, we got about 5 minutes before we hit the 2 hour mark. Dan's question is quite long. If
can
you're
see
fine
that.
going over 2 hours, that's fine. Or we can skip down to anonymous and basically stick to 2 hours. It depends on if you want to go over, Tom.
No, I do
Leave it
not.
to you.
Anonymous says, let's say you've got a choice of 2 spare bedrooms to turn into a small dedicated home theater. One is 10 by 11.5 and with just a single window, and the other is 10 by 13.5, but with 2 windows. Any reason to strongly favor one room over the other? I mean, where are the windows?
Yeah,
my
that's some of the
question.
consideration. Yeah, if it's really problematic placement, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, all things being equal, the slightly larger room with the slightly less square dimensions, is the one I would go for. But if the windows are situated in such a way that you can't place speakers or a screen or a TV
Sure.
or a seat
Where you
or whatever,
want/need to.
yeah, I mean it's more than just the size of the room and the number of windows. It's a lot of other things, including where's the door, where's the what was the ceiling
if
look
we're
like? I mean,
Assuming these are fairly standard bedrooms, which is what was described, and these are windows where you can deal with them, whatever it is. You can black them out, put curtains over them, and it isn't going to be the end of the world. Do keep in mind if you were worried about wall mounting a TV and you're like, can it go over one of these windows? Yeah, it can. It doesn't have to literally be mounted to the wall. You can put it on a TV stand. You can get one of the 3-in-1 stands where it looks like it's mounted, and it uses a wall mount, but it's actually freestanding. So there's easy ways to get around those type of things. But yes, in general, unless the windows really decide this for you, I would go for the larger room, because these both have the same width. If we're saying the 10 feet is going to be the width, one is just 2 feet longer than
Right.
the other. In general, that's just going to be more comfortable to sit in. It's going to give you at least a better chance of you having some amount of space behind your seat, right? So if you were planning on the same distance from seat to screen, no matter which room you were in, then the longer room is going to give you more space behind your seat. And acoustically speaking, that is almost always a good thing. Not having the back wall right behind your seat is pretty much always a good thing. So having that extra space behind you in the slightly longer room is beneficial. Then ironically, if we were looking at putting dual subs into this room, which I know he is because the next question is about dual subs. If you're putting dual subs into this room, ironically, the square room, you can still deal with it, but you might actually need 4 subs in the square room to actually not have problems across multiple seats, whereas in the rectangular room, 2 subs can almost certainly get you there as long as you're able to optimally position the 2 subs. So acoustics wise, the more rectangular room, even though we aren't talking about huge differences here, but acoustically, the more rectangular room is going to be easier to deal with and probably just feel more comfortable to sit in. So unless the windows absolutely decide this for you, I'd go for the slightly larger 13.5-foot long room.
Lastly, he asks, would a pair of SB1000 Pro subs be enough for either of those rooms, or would the PB1000 Pros be a lot better? Price is a factor. The SBs would be fine. And
Yeah, so I did like I've got a little bit of a tweak in my thinking on this because not everybody is you and I, Tom, in terms of what we want from our bass. So, first of all, the one room being 2.5 feet longer than the other, and the resultant cubic footage of air, that's not significant enough to really alter the calculations of sheer output from either of these. But like both Tom and I, we want essentially linear frequency response. We'll use something like Odyssey Dynamic EQ so that if we've turned the master volume down, our perception is still that the bass stayed flat. But both of us, basically, if we play a bass sweep, at 85 decibels, where our hearing is most linear, we more or less want that sweep to sound even. Like, that's what the signal said to do. That's what we want our sound system to do. But a lot of people want a boost in the bass. That's what they want. That's what they like. And I don't have any problem with that. So if you're the person who's like, yeah, I want my subwoofer output boosted 10 decibels, 12 decibels, which a lot of people do, and if that's what you want, I'm okay with that. What I would say is the SB1000 Pro can do in this room size what Tom and I want. By the numbers, it can give you that sort of linear bass, still relying on some room gain, to be honest, but it can basically give you that linear bass just there, but not really headroom above that. If you're the person who wants to boost your subwoofer output, 10 dB, because that's just the way you like it, then having the increased output, especially down at 20 hertz from the PB1000 Pro, you'd end up using that. The SB1000 Pro just wouldn't have any more output to give you way down there at 20 hertz. That said, the difference in physical size between these two subwoofers cannot be overstated. One of these things is not like the other in any regard. Right. And this brings in the whole other side, which is, you're going for the dual subs. That means you want more uniform bass across, I don't know, a love seat, a 3-seater couch, whatever can sort of squish into this 10-foot width of a room. The ability to optimally place a pair of SB1000 Pros is so much easier. Because they're these cute little cubes.
They are very small.
They aren't really that heavy, and fitting them physically in the optimal location is so much easier than Look, there's subs bigger than PB1000 Pros. We know there's subs way bigger than those, but they are big, heavy subwoofers. And so physically placing them in this room to where they're going to give you uniform bass, that's not a given with 1000 Pros. You might be pretty limited on where they're just physically able to fit. So what is important to you? If you're Tom and I, where what you want is linear, accurate to the signal bass response, and you care about uniformity, I would say get the SB1000 Pros, because they have just enough output to give you linear, accurate to the signal bass in this small room size, and they're so much easier to place. But if what you want is, I want my 10, 12 dB boost, then just be aware you're going to have to be really cognizant of how big those boxes are.
Yeah.
The last thing you said was that price is a factor, so I don't want you thinking that SVS is the only game in town.
Yeah.
Because there is a less expensive alternative to the PB, the ported 1000 Pros, that has essentially identical output and extension. That would be Monolith's M10 V2. Yeah. So the price difference there, it's $1,550 for a pair of PB1000 Pros, because they give you a $50 discount if you buy two of them. It's $1,280.50 for the M10 V2s from Monolith. And like I say, performance-wise, they're nearly identical. The SVS gives you the app to use on your smartphone for setup, but you're essentially going to use that once and then probably never touch it again.
Right.
So the Monolith doesn't have the app, but that's what, $300 almost in cost savings for nearly identical performance. The Monolith M10 is still huge. It's still massive. A big, heavy box.
Heavy, yes. I think, doesn't Andrew have a review of that one, or is it the 12 that he has?
It might be the M12s that he did, but it's pretty much the same. Now, the least expensive of these is the pair of SB 1000 Pros. That's $1,150 for a pair of those. So, unless you are if I always turn my subwoofers up 10 dB hot because that's what I like. Well, then consider the ported boxes, but just be very cognizant of their physical size.
Yeah, it's I gotta scroll down the bottom, but it's the M10 that Andrew reviewed.
Oh, okay.
So let me put this on here.
They ain't small, they ain't light.
They ain't small, they ain't light. Yes.
I love when people are like, but they're not a 15-inch sub. They're so much bigger. I'm like, yeah, there is so much bigger. These are still big.
Why? Right. All right. So that's it. And who do we have for next week again? Remind us.
Dan, right? Yep, Dan is there with quite a long question there, so we'll dig into that first next week.
All right, Dan, we'll see you next week. For the rest of you, if we want to get your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. We want to thank our listeners who have supported us in some way. We want to thank our 140 patrons over at patreon.com. Thank you very much.
Yes, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 140 patrons over there.
And thank those that have sent us notes of gratitude, including Jay, Gurinder, Julian, and Jorge. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll say the names one more time. Jay, Gurinder, Julian, and Jorge. Thank you so much for your notes of gratitude to us, for keeping the podcast going. Your notes of encouragement are very much appreciated. So big thank you to you and to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.